The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the general store in San Pedro, Arizona territory, kicking up a cloud of dust that made Miriam Reed cough into her lace handkerchief while her other hand clutched the brass cage containing her only companion, a yellow canary that had belonged to her late mother. It was September 1878, and the heat pressed down like a heavy blanket even as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the jagged horizon. Through the window, she could see a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair pushing back from his forehead, his green eyes scanning the coach with an expression somewhere between hope and apprehension. This had to be Robert Anderson, the rancher who had answered her advertisement in the Boston newspaper 3 months ago, the man whose letters had been so carefully worded and unexpectedly kind that she had sold everything she owned to make this journey west. The driver opened the door and offered his hand, which Miriam accepted gratefully, her legs stiff from days of travel. She stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her dark blue traveling dress wrinkled and dusty, her auburn hair coming loose from its pins despite her best efforts to remain presentable. The canary chirped softly in its cage, and she realized her hands were trembling. "Miss Reed." The tall man approached, removing his hat to reveal more of that thick, dark hair. His voice was deeper than she had imagined, with a warmth that made her heart skip. "I am Robert Anderson, Mr. Anderson." She managed a curtsy despite her exhaustion. "I apologize for my appearance. The journey was rather longer than I anticipated. You look just fine, miss." His eyes dropped to the bird cage and something in his expression softened. "That is a beautiful songbird. Her name is Melody. She was my mother's." Miriam lifted the cage slightly, watching as the canary hopped from one perch to another. "I hope you do not mind. Your letters never mentioned whether animals were welcome on your ranch, but I could not bear to leave her behind. She is all I have left of my family." Robert stepped closer, peering at the bird with genuine interest rather than irritation. "My letters did not mention it because I assumed it went without saying. A ranch is full of animals, Miss Reed. One more, especially one so small and lovely, makes no difference at all." He paused, then added quietly, "And I understand what it means to hold onto the last piece of someone you loved." The gentleness in his voice made Miriam blink back sudden tears. She had been prepared for disappointment, for a rough man who saw her merely as a convenience, someone to cook and clean and warm his bed. The letters had suggested something different, but letters could lie. Yet here he stood, this rancher with calloused hands and sun-creased eyes, looking at her bird cage with the kind of understanding that came from genuine loss. "Shall we collect your trunk?" he asked. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. We will arrive before full dark if we leave soon." "Yes, of course." Miriam watched as he moved to help the driver with her single trunk, the only luggage she had brought. Everything she owned in the world fit into one trunk and one bird cage. The realization should have been depressing, but instead she felt oddly light, as though she had shed a weight she had not known she was carrying. The wagon Robert had brought was well maintained, with a padded bench seat that showed signs of recent cleaning. He had prepared for her arrival, she realized. He had wanted to make a good impression. The thought warmed her more than the Arizona sun. As they left San Pedro behind, following a dusty trail through scrubland dotted with mesquite and palo verde trees, Robert kept the horses at an easy pace. Miriam held the bird cage carefully on her lap, watching the unfamiliar landscape roll past. Everything was so different from Boston, with its brick buildings and crowded streets, its constant noise and smoke. Here, the sky stretched endlessly in all directions, painted in shades of gold and pink as the sun continued its descent. Your letters mentioned you worked as a seamstress, Robert said, breaking the comfortable silence. That is a valuable skill out here. The nearest proper dressmaker is in Tucson, nearly 2 days' journey. I enjoy the work. My mother taught me when I was young. Miriam glanced at him, studying his profile. He had a strong jaw and a straight nose, and there was something inherently trustworthy about his face. Your letters mentioned you raise cattle and horses. The cattle are the main business, but I have a fondness for the horses. There is something about working with them, teaching them, earning their trust. He smiled slightly. I suppose that sounds foolish to someone from the city. Not at all. I think I understand. There is satisfaction in creating something with your own hands, in building a relationship, whether with fabric or with an animal. She paused, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind since his first letter. Why did you seek a mail-order bride, Mr. Anderson? You seem like a man who would have no trouble finding a wife through more conventional means. Robert was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. The truth is, Miss Reed, I am not very good at the conventional courting. I work from dawn until well past dusk most days. The few single women in San Pedro are spoken for, and I do not have the time or inclination to travel to larger towns for social events. But more than that, I wanted someone who chose this life deliberately, who understood what she was coming to. The ranch is isolated. The work is hard. I needed someone brave enough to cross a continent for a chance at something better, not someone who would see the ranch as a step down from town life. His honesty took her breath away. I appreciate your candor. I should be equally honest with you. I answered your advertisement because I had nowhere else to go. My mother died 6 months ago, and the family I worked for decided they no longer needed a seamstress. My savings would not have lasted another month in Boston. I am here because I needed to survive, but I am hoping to find more than mere survival. That is all any of us can hope for. Robert glanced at her, and their eyes met for a brief, charged moment before he returned his attention to the road. I am hoping for the same thing, Miss Reed. A partner. A companion. Someone to build a life with, not just someone to keep house. The canary suddenly burst into song, its clear, bright notes filling the evening air. Both of them laughed, the sound breaking the tension. She approves, Miriam said, smiling down at the cage. Then I consider myself fortunate to have her good opinion. Robert's expression was warm, though I hope to earn yours as well in time. As they crested a low rise, the ranch came into view. It was more substantial than Miriam had expected. A sturdy wooden house with a covered porch, several outbuildings in good repair, and corrals that held at least a dozen horses. The land stretched out in all directions, marked by fence lines and dotted with cattle in the distance. The house itself was painted white, with shutters on the windows and a chimney rising from one end. Smoke curled from that chimney, suggesting someone had already started a fire. My foreman and his wife live in the smaller house beyond the barn, Robert explained as they approached. Diego and Maria Santos. They have been with me for 5 years. Maria offered to help prepare meals and show you around the house until you are settled, if you would like the assistance. That would be very kind. Miriam felt both relieved and nervous. She had not expected to meet other people so soon, but it would be helpful to have another woman to talk to. Robert brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and secured the reins before jumping down. He came around to Miriam's side and offered his hands to help her down. When she placed her hands in his, she felt the rough calluses on his palms, the strength in his grip, and something else, a gentleness that made her feel safe rather than small. The front door opened, and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair streaked with gray and a warm smile. "You must be Miss Reed. Welcome. I am Maria Santos. Come inside, please. I have supper ready and you must be exhausted from your journey." "Thank you so much." Miriam followed Maria inside, still carrying the bird cage. The interior of the house was simple but well kept, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the smell of something savory filled the air. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large table, several chairs, and shelves lined with books. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. "I put fresh linens on the bed in the guest room," Maria said, leading Miriam to one of the doors. "Robert sleeps in the other bedroom. I assumed you would want separate rooms until after the wedding." "Yes, thank you." Miriam set the birdcage on a small table near the window. The room was modest but clean, with a comfortable-looking bed, a dresser, and a washstand. Someone, probably Maria, had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. Robert appeared in the doorway with her trunk, which he set down gently. "I will let you freshen up before supper. Take your time." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Miriam sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. She had done it. She had crossed the country to marry a stranger, and so far that stranger seemed to be everything his letters had promised. The house was solid and welcoming, the land was vast and beautiful in its harsh way, and Robert Anderson was kind and honest and surprisingly handsome. It almost seemed too good to be true, which made her nervous. What was she missing? What would she discover once the courtesy of first impressions wore away? The canary chirped, drawing her attention. Miriam moved to open the cage door slightly, offering her finger. Melody hopped onto it, her tiny claws gripping gently, and Miriam stroked the soft feathers with one finger. "What do you think, sweet girl? Is this home?" The bird tilted its head, then sang a few notes before hopping back to its perch. Miriam smiled despite her uncertainty. Her mother had always said that animals knew things people did not, that they could sense character and intention. If Melody was content, perhaps that was a good sign. She washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into a fresh dress, and repinned her hair as best she could without a proper mirror. When she emerged from the room, she found Robert setting the table while Maria ladled stew into bowls. The domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, that Miriam felt some of her anxiety ease. Supper was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Maria's husband Diego joined them, a weathered man with a quick smile and a quiet manner. He and Robert discussed the ranch business briefly, but mostly the conversation centered on helping Miriam learn about her new home. They told her about San Pedro, about the other ranches in the area, about the challenges of living in the Arizona territory. Maria offered to take her to town the following week to meet some of the other women and to visit the general store. Through it all, Miriam found herself watching Robert. He was attentive without being overbearing, including her in conversations but not putting her on the spot. He laughed easily at Diego's jokes and thanked Maria for the meal with genuine appreciation. This was a man who valued the people around him, who did not take their work for granted. After supper, Maria and Diego excused themselves to return to their own home. Robert walked them out, leaving Miriam alone in the main room. She moved to the bookshelf, curious about what a rancher in the Arizona territory would read. She found agricultural journals, several novels by Dickens and Hawthorne, a collection of poetry, and a worn Bible. The variety surprised and pleased her. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father," Robert said from the doorway, making her jump slightly. "She insisted I learn to read well and to value books. It is one of the greatest gifts she gave me. She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. She died when I was 17. My father followed her 2 years later. I think he simply did not want to be in the world without her. Robert moved to stand beside Miriam, pulling a slim volume from the shelf. This was her favorite, poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Miriam recognized the name. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. You know it." He sounded pleased. "My mother loved poetry as well. We used to read together in the evenings." The memory brought both comfort and pain. "I miss that. I miss her." "How long has she been gone?" 6 months. "It was influenza. She was sick for less than a week before she passed." Miriam's throat tightened. "I have not really had time to grieve properly. There was the funeral to arrange, her belongings to sort, my position to maintain. And then I lost my employment, and survival became more important than sadness." Robert was quiet for a moment, then said gently, "You can grieve here if you need to. You can be sad. You do not have to pretend to be strong every moment." The kindness in his words nearly undid her. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "Thank you. That means more than you might realize." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, both looking at the bookshelf but neither really seeing it. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. "I thought we might discuss the wedding." "I did not want to presume anything, but the local minister comes through San Pedro once a month. He will be here next Sunday. That gives us a week if you are comfortable with that timeline. If you need more time to adjust, we can wait. Next Sunday seems appropriate." Miriam turned to look at him directly. "I did not come all this way to drag my feet, Mr. Anderson. I understood what I was agreeing to when I answered your advertisement. Robert, please call me Robert, and may I call you Miriam?" "Yes, of course." "Good." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Miriam, I want you to know that I have no expectations beyond what you are willing to give. The guest room is yours for as long as you want it. We can take time to know each other before we become husband and wife in all ways." Miriam felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she appreciated his consideration. "That is very understanding of you. I think getting to know each other first would be wise. Then that is settled." Robert returned the poetry book to its shelf. "I need to wake before dawn tomorrow to check on the cattle in the north pasture, but I will return by midday. Maria will be here in the morning to help with breakfast and to show you around properly. Is there anything you need before you retire?" "Actually, there is one thing." Miriam glanced toward her bedroom door where the canary's cage was silhouetted in the lamplight. "You mentioned you wanted to hear her sing. Would you like to listen now? She often sings in the evening if the light is soft enough." "I would like that very much." Miriam retrieved the bird cage and set it on the table. She sat in one of the chairs and Robert took another. For a few minutes, Melody simply hopped between her perches, observing them with bright black eyes. Then, as if making a decision, she puffed out her chest and began to sing. The sound was pure and clear, filling the room with cascading notes that seemed too large to come from such a small creature. Miriam had heard her mother's bird sing thousands of times, but tonight the song seemed different, more hopeful somehow. She glanced at Robert and found him watching the bird with an expression of wonder. When Melody finally finished and settled onto her perch with a self-satisfied chirp, Robert let out a breath. "That was beautiful, truly beautiful. She was my mother's greatest treasure. My father bought her for my mother on their wedding day. She has been singing for nearly 10 years. Robert leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze moving from the bird to Miriam. "Then she should sing at our wedding too. It would be fitting, do you not think? A connection between your mother's marriage and yours." The suggestion caught Miriam completely off guard. She had expected tolerance of her pet at best, not this thoughtful inclusion of something that mattered to her. You would want that, truly. I cannot think of anything more appropriate. His expression was earnest. Your mother cannot be there, but a piece of her can. If we are building a life together, Miriam, it should include the things that matter to us both. Miriam felt tears spring to her eyes, and this time she did not fight them. That is perhaps the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Robert reached across the small distance between them and took her hand carefully, as if she might startle and pull away. His hand was warm and rough and steady. I meant what I said in my letters. I am looking for a true partner, not a servant. Your happiness matters to me, even though we barely know each other. Especially because we barely know each other. We should start as we mean to continue. She squeezed his hand in return, unable to find words adequate to express what she was feeling. Hope, she realized. For the first time in 6 months, she felt genuine hope for the future. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, the bird dozing on her perch, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Finally, Miriam stifled a yawn, and Robert immediately released her hand and stood. You are exhausted. Forgive me for keeping you up. He stepped back to give her space. Sleep as late as you need tomorrow. Maria will not mind waiting. Thank you, Robert, for everything. For picking me up from town, for the lovely supper, for understanding about Melody, for all of it. You are very welcome. He hesitated, then added, I am glad you are here, Miriam. I know it is early to say such things, but I have a good feeling about this, about us. So do I, she admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in the quiet ranch house, Miriam listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert. The distant call of a coyote, the whisper of wind through mesquite, the creak of the house settling. Instead of feeling afraid or alone, she felt something like peace. Her mother was gone, her old life was over, but perhaps that meant she could build something new, something good. The next week passed in a blur of activity and discovery. Miriam woke each morning to find Robert already gone, out working the ranch with Diego and the handful of cowhands they employed. Maria arrived shortly after dawn to help prepare breakfast and to teach Miriam the rhythms of ranch life. She learned where things were kept, how to manage the wood-burning stove, which wells provided the best water. Maria was patient and kind, never making Miriam feel foolish for not knowing things that seemed obvious to someone who had lived in the territory for years. In the afternoons, Robert would return and they would share the midday meal together. He always asked about her day, genuinely interested in the small details of what she had learned or discovered. Sometimes he would take her out to see parts of the ranch, showing her the horses he was training or the new calves that had been born that season. He was clearly proud of what he had built, but he was not boastful. Instead, he spoke of plans for the future, improvements he wanted to make, dreams he had for expanding the operation. Miriam found herself looking forward to these conversations more and more. Robert was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He listened when she talked about her work as a seamstress, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from simple cloth. He asked her opinion on things, from what color to paint the bedroom shutters to whether they should plant a vegetable garden come spring. The evenings became their special time. After supper, they would sit together in the main room, sometimes reading aloud to each other, sometimes simply talking. Robert was teaching her about the constellations visible in the vast Arizona sky, and she was teaching him about music, explaining the basics of melody and harmony. Melody, the canary, seemed to approve of their growing friendship, often singing her evening song while they sat together. On Thursday, Maria took Miriam into San Pedro to purchase fabric for a wedding dress. The town was small but lively, with a general store, a saloon, a church that also served as a schoolhouse, and a handful of other buildings. Maria introduced Miriam to several other women, including Ruth Peterson, the banker's wife, and Alina Grant, who ran a small bakery with her husband. "We are so pleased to have another woman joining our community," Ruth said warmly. "Robert Anderson is a good man. You are fortunate to be marrying him." "I am beginning to realize that," Miriam replied honestly. At the general store, Miriam selected a length of cream-colored silk that would make a suitable wedding dress. The cost made her wince, but Maria insisted it was worth the expense. "You only get married once," Maria said firmly. "It should be special." That evening, Miriam showed Robert the fabric. He ran his fingers over it carefully, his work-roughened hands catching slightly on the smooth surface. "It is beautiful like you," he said simply, and Miriam felt warmth spread through her chest. "I will need to work quickly to have it finished by Sunday. Is there anything I can do to help? Keep me company while I sew?" She smiled at him. "Tell me more stories about growing up here. I want to know everything about you." So Robert talked while Miriam cut and pinned and stitched. He told her about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about helping his father build the ranch from nothing, about the hard years when drought had nearly destroyed them and the good years when everything seemed to go right. He told her about his friendship with Diego, who had arrived at the ranch looking for work and had become like a brother. He told her about his dreams of breeding horses that would be known throughout the territory for their strength and intelligence. In turn, Miriam told him about her childhood in Boston, about her father who had died when she was 12, about her mother's determination to keep them fed and housed through her work as a laundress. She told him about discovering her talent for sewing, about the satisfaction of mastering a difficult technique, about the wealthy families she had worked for, and their casual cruelty disguised as kindness. "You do not have to please anyone here but yourself," Robert said quietly. "I want you to understand that. This is your home now. You are not a servant or an employee. You are my equal in every way that matters." "I am still learning to believe that," Miriam admitted. "All my life I have been dependent on the goodwill of others. It is strange to think I might have a say in my own fate." "You have more than a say. You have control." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "If you wake up Sunday morning and decide you do not want to marry me, we will find another solution. You will not be forced into anything. I need you to know that. Robert." She set down her sewing and looked at him directly. "I appreciate your concern, but I am not having second thoughts. Quite the opposite, actually. Every day I spend here, every conversation we have, convinces me more that this is exactly where I am meant to be." The smile that spread across his face was brilliant. "I feel the same way. When I sent that advertisement to the newspaper, I was hopeful but not particularly optimistic. I thought I might find someone practical, someone who could tolerate this life. I never imagined I would find you." "What is so special about me?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. "Everything." He did not hesitate. "Your strength, your intelligence, the way you speak your mind but with kindness, the way you look at the world with curiosity instead of fear, the way you sing to your bird when you think no one is listening, the way you laugh when I make a terrible joke. Shall I continue?" Miriam felt her cheeks flush with pleasure. "I think that is sufficient for now." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and Miriam felt something shift between them, a deepening of the affection that had been growing all week. She wanted to move closer, to touch him, but she was not quite brave enough yet. Instead, she picked up her sewing again, hiding her expression in the careful work of setting sleeves. By Saturday evening, The dress was complete. It was the finest thing Miriam had ever made for herself, with delicate pleating at the bodice and lace trim at the collar and cuffs. When she tried it on in the privacy of her room, with Maria there to help with the buttons, she barely recognized herself in the small mirror. "You look beautiful," Maria said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Robert will not be able to look away. I hope you are right." Miriam smoothed her hands over the silk, feeling its cool softness. Tomorrow she would put this dress on and speak vows that would bind her to a man she had known for only a week. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt calm and certain. That night, she could not sleep. Restless, she rose and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the desert chill. She had just opened her door when she found Robert standing in the main room, clearly unable to sleep as well. "I did not mean to disturb you," he said quickly. "You did not. I could not settle." She moved to stand beside him near the fireplace, where embers still glowed faintly. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, the opposite. I am too eager for tomorrow to come." He glanced at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Is it foolish to be this certain about someone I have known for such a short time? If it is foolish, then we are both fools." Miriam gathered her courage and reached for his hand. "I keep expecting to wake up and find this is a dream, that I am still in Boston struggling to pay rent on a room I could not afford." Robert turned to face her fully, raising their linked hands to press a kiss against her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly and made her heart race. "This is real. I am real. Tomorrow is real. We are building something together, Miriam, and I think it is going to be extraordinary." "I think so too." She swayed slightly closer, drawn by a pull she did not fully understand but did not want to resist. "May I kiss you?" His voice was rough, uncertain in a way she had not heard from him before. Instead of answering, Miriam closed the small distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle and brief, a question and an answer all at once. When she pulled back, she was trembling. Robert's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with infinite care. "That was worth waiting for. We have our whole lives for more," she said softly. "Yes, we do." He kissed her forehead gently. "But for now, we should try to sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." Miriam nodded, though she did not want to step away from him. Finally, she forced herself to return to her room, where Melody chirped sleepily from her cage. Miriam lay in bed, her fingers touching her lips, replaying that single perfect kiss until she finally drifted into dreams. Sunday dawned clear and bright, with the kind of intense blue sky that seemed impossible to someone raised in the often gray East. Miriam woke early, her stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Maria arrived before breakfast, bringing Alina Grant with her. "We are here to help you prepare," Maria announced. "Every bride needs attendants." Alina had brought flowers, delicate white blooms that she said grew wild near her house. "They are called sacred datura," she explained. "They only bloom at night and early morning. I gathered them just after dawn. They are perfect." Miriam was touched by the thoughtfulness. These women barely knew her, yet they were treating her like family. While Maria prepared a light breakfast that Miriam was too nervous to eat, Alina helped her with her hair, pinning it up in an elaborate style and weaving in some of the flowers. When Miriam finally put on the cream silk dress, both women stepped back with admiration. "Robert is a lucky man," Alina said. "I am the lucky one," Miriam corrected gently. The ceremony was to take place at the small church in San Pedro at noon. Robert had left early with Diego to make arrangements and to give Miriam privacy to prepare. Now, as Maria drove the wagon into town with Miriam and Alina as passengers, Miriam felt her nerves increase. This was happening. This was real. The church was fuller than she had expected. Robert had said only a few people would attend, but it seemed like half the town had turned out. Ranchers and their families, shopkeepers, even the banker and his wife filled the simple pews. At the front, Robert stood with Diego beside him, both men dressed in their finest clothes. When Robert turned and saw Miriam in the doorway, his expression transformed into something so tender it made her breath catch. She carried Melody's cage in her hands, as they had planned. The canary seemed unbothered by the attention, sitting calmly on her perch. As Miriam walked down the short aisle, she heard whispers of curiosity about the bird, but she ignored them, focused entirely on Robert. When she reached the front, Robert took her free hand while she held the cage in the other. "You are breathtaking," he whispered. The minister, a kindly older man named Reverend Thomas, smiled at them both. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was traditional and brief. They spoke the ancient vows, promising to love and honor each other through all circumstances. When Robert slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hand was steady while hers trembled. Then it was her turn, and she slid a matching band onto his finger, marveling at how right it looked there. "Before I pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas said, "I understand there is one more participant in this ceremony who wishes to offer her blessing." Miriam opened the door of the birdcage and offered her finger. Melody hopped onto it immediately, and Miriam lifted her hand high. For a moment, the bird simply sat there, observing the gathered people with her bright eyes. Then, as if she understood the significance of the moment, she opened her beak and sang. The church fell silent except for that pure, clear voice. Melody sang as she had sung for Miriam's mother, as she had sung in the evenings at the ranch, but this song seemed different, richer somehow. It was a song of joy and promise, of new beginnings and old blessings. When she finally fell silent and hopped back into her cage, there was not a dry eye in the church. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Thomas said, his own voice thick with emotion, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Robert, you may kiss your bride." Robert cupped Miriam's face in both hands and kissed her gently, sweetly, while the congregation erupted in applause. When they broke apart, both were smiling so broadly it almost hurt. The celebration afterward was held at the town's community hall, a simple building that served for gatherings of all kinds. Women from the town had prepared food, and someone had brought a fiddle. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Miriam found herself swept up in it all, meeting people whose names she would struggle to remember but whose kindness she would never forget. Robert barely left her side all afternoon, his hand always at her back or linked with hers. When the fiddle player struck up a waltz, he led her onto the makeshift dance floor. "I should warn you that I am not a very good dancer," he said as they began to move. "Neither am I, so we are well matched." She laughed as he stepped on her toe, then immediately apologized. "See, I told you." They spun around the floor with more enthusiasm than grace, and Miriam could not remember ever being happier. This was her wedding day, and she was marrying a good man who valued her, who made her laugh, who looked at her like she was precious. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. As the afternoon stretched into evening, guests began to depart. Diego and Maria were among the last to leave, Maria hugging Miriam tightly. "Be happy," she whispered. "You both deserve it." Finally, it was just the two of them, making the journey back to the ranch in Robert's wagon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Miriam sat close to Robert, her head resting against his shoulder while he drove with one hand, the other arm around her. "Thank you for letting Melody sing," she said quietly. "It meant the world to me." "Thank you for agreeing to marry me." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I know this has all been fast, but Miriam, I meant every word I said today. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. You already do make me happy." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I was so afraid when I left Boston. I thought I was going to my doom, marrying a stranger who might turn out to be cruel or indifferent. Instead, I found you. I am the one who was found." His voice was rough with emotion. "I was lonely, Miriam. I did not realize how lonely until you arrived, and suddenly, the house felt like a home instead of just a place to sleep between work." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, arriving at the ranch as true darkness fell. Robert helped Miriam down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It is tradition." He navigated the steps carefully and pushed open the door with his shoulder. Inside, someone, probably Maria, had lit lamps and left a cold supper on the table along with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Robert set Miriam down gently but did not release her. "Are you tired? We can eat, or we can talk, or we can retire. Whatever you wish." Miriam's heart was pounding. They were married now. This was their wedding night. She had known this moment would come, but knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. "I am not particularly hungry." "Neither am I." He studied her face, his expression serious. "But I do not want you to feel pressured. We have time for everything." "Robert." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat as rapid as her own. "I want to be your wife in all ways. I am nervous, but I am not afraid, not with you." He kissed her then, deeper than before, with a passion that had been carefully restrained until now. Miriam responded in kind, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am certain." Robert took her hand and led her to his bedroom, the room that would now be theirs. Inside, the lamp was already lit, casting a warm glow. He closed the door gently, giving them privacy, then turned to face her. What followed was tender and sweet, with a passionate intensity that surprised Miriam. Robert was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted each step. There were awkward moments, uncertain fumbles as they learned each other. But there was also joy and connection, and a sense of rightness that transcended the physical. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Miriam's head on Robert's chest, his arms wrapped around her. She could hear his heartbeat slowing to a steady rhythm, could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. "Are you well?" he asked softly, his fingers trailing through her loose hair. "I am more than well." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "I am happy." "Good, that is all I want, your happiness." He tightened his arms around her. "Miriam Anderson, that has a nice sound to it." She smiled against his skin, testing the name in her mind. Miriam Anderson. It did sound nice. It sounded like a promise, like a future, like home. They talked late into the night, sharing secrets and dreams, learning each other in ways that went beyond the physical. Robert told her about his fear that he would never find someone who truly understood him, that he would spend his life alone. Miriam told him about the crushing loneliness of her last months in Boston, the despair that had driven her to answer his advertisement. "We saved each other," she said finally. "Yes, I think we did." He kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep, my love. Tomorrow we start our life together in earnest." Miriam drifted off feeling safe and cherished, Robert's heartbeat a steady lullaby beneath her ear. The days that followed established a new rhythm. Miriam would wake early with Robert, preparing breakfast while he and Diego planned the day's work. After Robert left, she would spend the morning on household tasks, but not in the burdensome way she had worked for wealthy families in Boston. This was her home, her domain, and there was satisfaction in making it clean and comfortable. Maria still came by several times a week, but as a friend now rather than a teacher. They would have coffee together and talk about everything from recipes to local gossip. Miriam learned about the other ranching families, about the challenges of living in the territory, about the ongoing tensions with some of the Apache groups in the region. Most of the Apache were forced onto reservations years ago, Maria explained one morning. But there are still some who resist, who live free in the mountains. They mostly leave us alone if we leave them alone, but there is always tension. Miriam found the history both fascinating and disturbing. The injustices done to the native people were impossible to ignore, even as she benefited from the land that had been taken from them. She asked Robert about it one evening, and he was thoughtful in his response. "It is not right, what was done to them," he said quietly. "My father bought this land from a man who bought it from the government, and the government took it by force. I cannot change that history, but I try to be fair when I encounter Apache or any of the other tribes. I trade honestly. I do not run them off if they cross our land, and I do not participate in the kind of violence some ranchers consider acceptable." His answer satisfied her, showing a moral conscience she had hoped for but not been certain she would find. As autumn deepened into early winter, Miriam settled fully into her new life. She discovered she had a talent for working with the horses, and Robert began teaching her to ride properly. She spent hours in the corral with a gentle mare named Copper, learning to communicate with the animal through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. "You are a natural," Robert said one afternoon, watching her guide Copper through a series of turns. "I think you have more talent for this than I do." "I doubt that very much, but I appreciate the compliment." She dismounted and patted Copper's neck affectionately. "There is something magical about it, is there not? The partnership between horse and rider. It is trust. The horse trusts you not to hurt her, and you trust her to carry you safely. It is the foundation of everything." He moved closer, helping her remove Copper's saddle, rather like marriage actually. Miriam smiled up at him. "Are you comparing me to a horse, husband?" "Only in the most flattering ways." He kissed her quickly, laughing when she swatted his arm. In the evenings, after supper was cleared away, they would read together or talk or simply sit in comfortable silence. Melody's evening song became a cherished ritual, her clear notes filling the house with music. Sometimes Miriam would sing along, her own voice blending with the canaries, and Robert would watch with an expression of such contentment that it made her heart swell. One night in early December, as they sat before the fire, Robert took Miriam's hand and placed it on his chest. "Do you feel that? My heart beats for you now. I did not think I could love someone so much so quickly, but here we are." "I love you too," Miriam said, the words spilling out naturally. They had not said it before, both holding back perhaps out of caution or fear, but now it felt right. "I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. Do not be frightened. I am not going anywhere." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "We have our whole lives ahead of us, Miriam. Years and years to love each other, to build our family, to grow old together." "Tell me what you imagine," she said softly. "When you think about our future, what do you see?" Robert was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. "I see children, several of them, running around the ranch and getting into trouble. I see us teaching them to ride and to raid and to be good people. I see expanding the horse breeding operation until we are known throughout the territory. I see growing old with you, sitting on that porch when we are gray and weathered, watching our grandchildren play." He paused. "What do you see?" "The same things, mostly. I see a family filled with love and laughter. I see myself making clothes for our children, teaching them the things my mother taught me. I see us hosting gatherings, filling this house with friends and life. I see waking up beside you every morning for the rest of my life and being grateful for every single day." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I see being happy, Robert, genuinely, truly happy. Then we are both seeing the same future." He kissed her deeply. "And we will make it happen together." As winter settled over the ranch, Miriam discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, a combination of missed courses and morning sickness that finally became impossible to ignore. She told Robert one evening in late January, nervous about his reaction despite knowing he wanted children. His response was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, laughing with pure joy, then immediately set her down gently as if afraid he might hurt her. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "Miriam, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She searched his face, needing to see the truth there. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am ecstatic. I am terrified. I am more in love with you than I thought possible." He knelt in front of her, pressing his hands gently to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. This is your father speaking. I cannot wait to meet you." Miriam laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You are already a wonderful father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Maria proved invaluable, sharing her knowledge and experience from raising her own 3 children. Alina visited often, bringing food and company and endless enthusiasm. Robert became almost comically protective, insisting Miriam rest more, work less, avoid anything remotely strenuous. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "I know, but I cannot help myself. You are carrying our child. You are precious beyond measure." He took the wet clothes from her hands. "Let me do this, please." She relented because she loved him, because his concern came from a place of love rather than control. Besides, it was rather sweet to be so thoroughly cherished. As spring bloomed across the desert, painting the landscape with wildflowers, Miriam spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes from soft fabric, hemmed blankets, transformed a corner of their bedroom into a nursery space. Robert built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and finishing it with care. "My father made my cradle," he said as he worked. "I slept in it, and then my younger sister before she died of fever. I wish I still had it to pass down, but this one will start our tradition." Miriam ran her hand over the smooth wood. "It is perfect. Our baby is so lucky to have you as a father." The baby arrived in late August 1879, on a sweltering afternoon when the heat seemed to press down from all sides. The labor was long and difficult, with Maria and Alina both present to help. Robert paced outside, driven from the room by Maria, who insisted he would only be in the way. When the baby's first cry finally rang out, Maria opened the door to let Robert in. "You have a son," she said, beaming. Robert rushed to the bed where Miriam lay exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "A son," he breathed, settling carefully beside her. "May I?" She transferred the baby into his arms, watching as Robert's face transformed with wonder and love. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming lustily, his tiny face red with outrage. "He has your lungs," Robert said, unable to stop smiling. "And your determination, I think." "What should we name him?" Miriam asked. They had discussed names for months without reaching a firm decision. Now, looking at their son, Robert said, "William, after my father. William Robert Anderson, if that suits you." "William." Miriam tested the name. "Yes, that is perfect. Hello, William. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby's cries gradually quieted as Robert rocked him gently. Watching them together, her husband and her son, Miriam felt a completeness she had not known was possible. This was her family. This was her home. This was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had dared to dream. The first months of William's life were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning to interpret different cries and to function on minimal rest. Robert was an involved father from the beginning, walking the floor with William when he was fussy, changing his cloths without complaint, sitting with Miriam during the long night feedings just to keep her company. "You do not have to stay awake with us," she said one night as she nursed William. "You have work in the morning. So do you. Besides, I do not want to miss these moments. He will only be this small once." Robert reached out to stroke William's soft hair. "I keep thinking about my own father, wondering if he felt like this. This overwhelming love mixed with terror that I will somehow fail him." "You could never fail him. You are already an amazing father." She leaned her head against Robert's shoulder. "We are doing this together, remember? We will make mistakes, but we will figure it out as we go." As William grew from a newborn into an infant and then a lively toddler, the ranch prospered. Robert's reputation for breeding quality horses spread, and buyers came from as far as Tucson and Phoenix to purchase his stock. The cattle operation remained profitable, and they were able to hire additional hands to help with the work. Miriam established herself in the community as well, becoming known for her sewing skills. Women would bring her fabric and patterns, commissioning dresses for special occasions. She did not need the money, but she enjoyed the work and the social connection it provided. William's first word was horse, much to Robert's delight. By the time he was 2, he was already begging to ride, so Robert would set him in the saddle in front of him and walk the horses around the corral. Miriam watched these sessions from the fence, her hand resting on her swelling belly. She was pregnant again, due in the spring of 1882. "You hope for a boy or a girl this time?" Robert asked one evening. "Healthy," Miriam replied. "That is all I hope for. Though it would be nice for William to have a sister, someone different from him." "A little girl with your eyes and your talent for music," Robert mused. "I would like that very much." Their daughter arrived in April, an easier birth than William's had been. She had auburn hair like Miriam's and Robert's green eyes, and she was quieter than William had been, observing the world with a solemn gaze. They named her Catherine Rose, and she became the darling of the household. William, now 2.5, was initially suspicious of this small creature who took so much of his parents' attention, but he gradually warmed to her, becoming fiercely protective of his little sister. The years flowed past in a rhythm of work and family, of seasons changing and children growing. William proved to have his father's affinity for animals, spending hours in the barns and corrals, learning everything he could about horses and cattle. Catherine was quieter, more bookish, but she had inherited her mother's musical talent. Miriam taught her to sing, and soon Catherine's voice joined with melodies in the evening concerts that still took place each night. In 1884, another son arrived, named James Daniel. He was a happy baby who smiled early and often, bringing laughter to the household. Then in 1886, another daughter, Elizabeth Grace, completed their family. With 4 children ranging from infant to 7 years old, the ranch house was constantly filled with noise and activity. Miriam sometimes thought back to her younger self, the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in San Pedro with nothing but a trunk and a bird cage. That woman would not have believed the life she had now. A loving husband, 4 beautiful children, a home filled with joy and music, a community where she was valued and respected. One evening, after the children were finally all asleep, Miriam and Robert sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Melody's cage hung nearby, the bird quiet now in the darkness. "You remember the day we met?" Miriam asked, her hand linked with Robert's. "Every detail. You were so nervous, holding that bird cage like a lifeline. I was terrified you would take one look at me and the ranch and get back on that stage coach." He raised their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. "Thank God you stayed. I was never going to leave. From the moment you said you wanted Melody to sing at our wedding, I knew you were the man I was meant to spend my life with." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you more now than I did then. I did not think that was possible, but every day with you, every challenge we have faced together, every joy we have shared, it all adds to my love for you." "I feel the same way." Robert's arm came around her shoulders. "You are my heart, Miriam. You and the children, you are everything that matters." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. In the house behind them, their children slept safely. In the cage beside them, Melody dozed on her perch, the songbird that had witnessed the beginning of their love story still singing her evening songs after all these years. As the 1880s progressed into the 1890s, the ranch continued to thrive. William grew into a responsible young man, taking on more duties as Robert began to slow down slightly with age. At 18, William was already showing signs of surpassing his father's skill with horses, breaking and training them with a patience and empathy that brought out the best in even the most difficult animals. Catherine, at 16, was a talented seamstress like her mother and a beautiful singer. She had suitors already, young men from neighboring ranches who would ride over on flimsy pretenses just to catch a glimpse of her. Robert watched these visits with a mixture of pride and protectiveness, much to Miriam's amusement. "They are just boys," she reminded him when he glowered at a young cowboy who had brought Catherine flowers. "Boys with intentions toward my daughter," Robert grumbled. "I do not like it. You were a boy with intentions once." Miriam patted his arm. "She is sensible. She will choose wisely when the time comes." James, at 14, and Elizabeth, at 12, rounded out the family. James had his father's work ethic and his mother's thoughtful nature, while Elizabeth was spirited and adventurous, always climbing trees and racing her horse, and generally giving her parents minor heart attacks. Melody, the canary, had finally passed away in 1889, peacefully in her sleep after 19 years of faithful song. Miriam had wept for days, mourning not just the bird but the final physical connection to her mother. Robert had held her through the grief, understanding its depth. "She gave us her blessing," he said softly. "At our wedding, she sang for us. I like to think she knew how happy we would be and she wanted to be part of it." They had buried Melody in the garden under a rose bush with a small stone marker that Catherine had painted with delicate flowers. The children had all attended the small ceremony, understanding that this bird had been important to their mother, a link to the grandmother they had never known. One evening in the spring of 1895, the family gathered on the porch after supper. This had become a tradition over the years, this time together as the sun set and the desert cooled. Catherine brought out her guitar, an instrument she had learned to play with the same dedication she brought to everything, and began to strum a gentle melody. William sat on the steps whittling a piece of wood, something that would eventually become a toy for one of Diego and Maria's grandchildren. James was reading a book by lamplight, while Elizabeth braided and unbraided her long hair, unable to sit still even at rest. Miriam sat in the rocking chair Robert had made for her years ago, watching her family with a contentment that never grew old. Robert stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, and she reached up to cover one of his hands with her own. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "Everything, all of this. How different my life could have been if I had not found the courage to answer your advertisement." She squeezed his hand. "I was so afraid that day in Boston when I posted my letter. I almost did not do it. What changed your mind?" "I found a yellow feather on the ground outside the post office. It reminded me of Melody, and I thought about what my mother would want for me. She would not want me to live in fear. She would want me to be brave, to take chances." Miriam smiled at the memory. "So I posted the letter, and I got on that stagecoach, and I came to Arizona Territory to marry a stranger." "Best decision you ever made." Robert's voice held a teasing note. "Best decision I ever made," she confirmed without hesitation. Catherine's guitar playing had attracted an audience. Several of the ranch hands had drifted over, along with Diego and Maria. Someone started singing along with the music, and soon there was a full gathering happening on the porch and in the yard. This was life, Miriam thought. This community, this family, this love. When she had stepped off that stagecoach 17 years ago, clutching a birdcage and wondering what kind of mistake she was making, she could never have imagined this richness, this fullness, this joy. "Tell us the story," Elizabeth called out. "About how you and Papa met." About the birds singing at the wedding. It had become a favorite tale over the years, one the children never tired of hearing. Miriam glanced up at Robert, who nodded his encouragement. "Very well," she said. It was September 1878, and I had just spent 5 days on a stagecoach traveling from Boston to San Pedro. I was exhausted and dusty, and more than a little frightened about meeting the man I had agreed to marry through letters alone. All I had with me was a trunk of clothes and my mother's canary in her brass cage. The children settled in to listen, even though they knew the story by heart. Miriam told it well, describing her first glimpse of Robert, his kindness about the bird, the growing affection through that first week. She described choosing the silk for her wedding dress, the ceremony in the small church, and finally, Melody's song. "That bird sang like she understood exactly what was happening," Miriam said softly. "Like she was giving her blessing to our union. Your father had suggested she sing at the wedding, which was when I knew he was a man I could truly love." "Because he was kind to your bird?" James asked. "Because he understood what she represented. She was my last connection to my mother, to my old life. By including her in our wedding, your father was telling me that my past mattered, that the things I loved and valued would have a place in our new life together. That kind of understanding, that empathy, is rare and precious." Robert squeezed her shoulders gently. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach. You looked so brave and so frightened at the same time. I knew right then that I would do everything in my power to make you happy." "And you have," Miriam said, reaching up to touch his face. "Every single day you have." The gathering continued into the evening with music and laughter and stories. This was the family they had built, the life they had created together. When Miriam finally stood to go inside, needing rest after the long day, Robert walked with her. "You have any regrets?" he asked as they prepared for bed. "Anything you wish had been different?" Miriam considered the question seriously. "I wish I could have had more time with my mother. I wish she could have met you and the children. But as for my choices, my life, no regrets at all. You are everything I needed and more than I dared to hope for." They lay together in the bed they had shared for 17 years, fitting together with the ease of long practice. Robert's arms came around her, holding her close. "I love you, Miriam Anderson. I have loved you since the day we met, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too, Robert Anderson. Thank you for seeing past the frightened woman with the bird cage and recognizing the partner you needed. Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on a lonely rancher in the middle of the Arizona Territory." They fell asleep, as they had almost every night for 17 years. wrapped in each other's arms, content, and complete. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. William married a sweet girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch in 1897, and they built a house on the edge of Robert and Miriam's property. Their first child, Robert's first grandchild, arrived in 1898, a boy they named Robert after his grandfather. Seeing Robert hold his grandson for the first time, his weathered face soft with wonder, Miriam was reminded of the day he had first held William. Some things never changed. His capacity for love, his gentleness with small creatures, his dedication to family. Catherine married in 1899 to a young lawyer who had moved to San Pedro to establish a practice. He was educated and kind, and while Robert grumbled about losing his daughter, he approved of the match. Catherine moved into town but visited the ranch frequently, often bringing her husband, who was learning to appreciate ranch life despite his city upbringing. James showed an interest in expanding the ranch's operations into new territories, and Robert encouraged this entrepreneurial spirit. Together, father and son traveled to explore opportunities, strengthening their bond while building the business. Elizabeth, true to her adventurous nature, announced at 16 that she wanted to train as a teacher. Both Miriam and Robert supported this, proud of her ambition and intelligence. She attended normal school in Tucson, writing long letters home about her studies and experiences. As the new century dawned in 1900, Robert and Miriam found themselves in a house that was quieter than it had been in years. William and Sarah had their own home. Catherine was married and in town, James was often traveling, and Elizabeth was away at school. For the first time in over 20 years, they were alone together. "It is strange, is it not?" Miriam said one evening. "The house feels so empty, but also peaceful." Robert pulled her close on the porch swing he had installed years ago. "I love our children desperately, but I confess I have been looking forward to having you to myself again." "We are getting old," Miriam observed. She was 43 now, Robert 45. Their hair was streaked with gray, their faces lined with the years of sun and wind and laughter. "We are getting distinguished," Robert corrected, "and I love you more now than ever. You are even more beautiful to me today than you were at 26. You are a shameless flatterer." But she was pleased nonetheless. "I am an honest man telling the truth to his wife." He kissed her temple. "We have built something remarkable, Miriam. Look at our children, how strong and good they are. Look at this ranch, how it has prospered. Look at our life together, 22 years of partnership and love. I would not change a single moment, not even the hard parts. The droughts, the cattle we lost to disease, the times when money was so tight I had to sew through the night to earn extra, especially not those parts. Those challenges proved what we already knew, that together we can handle anything." He tightened his arms around her. "You are my partner in all things, Miriam. My best friend, my lover, my equal. I thank God every day for that stagecoach that brought you to me." They sat together as the stars emerged, the same stars they had watched on countless other evenings. The ranch spread out around them, dark shapes in the night, familiar and beloved. "Tell me what you see when you think about our future now," Miriam said, echoing the conversation they had had so many years ago. Robert was quiet for a moment, considering. "I see us growing old together, just as we planned. I see watching our grandchildren grow up, teaching them about horses and the land. I see you finally having time to sew just for pleasure instead of necessity. I see quiet evenings like this, the two of us together, content in the life we have built. And eventually, when we are very old, I see us sitting on this porch, holding hands and being grateful for every day we were given. That sounds perfect." Miriam leaned her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "Though I hope we have many more years before we reach the very old stage." "Many more years," Robert agreed. "I plan to be around to annoy you for a long time yet." She laughed softly. "You have never annoyed me." "Exasperated me occasionally, yes, but never annoyed." "I will try harder then." They sat in comfortable silence, Robert's hand stroking Miriam's hair in a gesture as familiar as breathing. After a while, Miriam began to hum, then to sing softly, one of the songs her mother used to sing. Robert joined in, his rough bass blending with her clear alto, their voices weaving together in harmony. When the song ended, Robert said quietly, "Do you ever think about that day you arrived? How different both our lives could have been?" "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on what might have been. This is what is, and it is more than I ever dreamed possible." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Do you remember what you said when you first saw Melody?" "I said she was beautiful. You said she should sing at our wedding. That was the moment I started to fall in love with you. You saw something that mattered to me, and instead of dismissing it or merely tolerating it, you found a way to honor it and include it in our new life together. It seemed only right. She was important to you, therefore she was important to me. It is a simple equation." He smiled down at her. "Though I confess I did not expect her song to be quite so moving. There were moments during that ceremony when I thought I might embarrass myself by weeping." "You did have tears in your eyes, as did everyone else in that church." He paused, then added softly, "I miss her sometimes. Is that strange? To miss a bird? Not strange at all. She was part of our beginning. She witnessed our vows and blessed our union. She sang for us through 17 years of marriage." Miriam felt her own eyes grow damp. "I like to think she is with my mother now, singing in some better place." They remained on the porch until the night grew cold, finally retiring to their bedroom. As Miriam brushed out her graying hair, Robert came up behind her and took the brush from her hand, completing the task himself as he had done countless times over the years. "I have been thinking," he said as he drew the brush through her long hair. "We should travel. Take a trip together, just the two of us. We have never had a proper honeymoon. After 22 years of marriage, better late than never, we could go to San Francisco, see the ocean. You have never seen the Pacific, have you?" "I have never seen any ocean. I came west by land routes entirely." The idea was both exciting and daunting. "Could we leave the ranch for that long? William and Diego can manage. We would only be gone a few weeks." He set down the brush and turned her to face him. "I want to take you on adventures, Miriam. I want to show you new places and have experiences that are just ours." His enthusiasm was infectious. "Then let us do it. Let us go to San Francisco and see the ocean and have adventures." They made the trip in the spring of 1901, traveling by train through landscapes that amazed them both. Robert had lived his entire life in the Arizona Territory, and seeing mountains and forests, and finally, the vast Pacific Ocean was a revelation. Miriam, who had traveled from Boston to Arizona years ago, found the westward journey equally wonderful. Standing on the beach in San Francisco, watching waves crash against the shore, Robert took Miriam's hand. "This reminds me of your eyes," he said. "Constantly changing, sometimes calm and sometimes stormy, but always beautiful. You are getting poetic in your old age." But she was touched by the comparison. They spent 2 weeks in San Francisco, seeing the sights and enjoying the freedom of being just a couple rather than parents and ranchers. They went to restaurants and theaters, rode cable cars, and walked through parks. It was a second honeymoon in truth, a chance to remember who they were as individuals and as partners. On their last night before heading home, they stood together on their hotel balcony overlooking the city. Robert wrapped his arms around Miriam from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Thank you for this," she said. "For thinking of it, for making it happen. These weeks have been wonderful. Thank you for coming west all those years ago, for being brave enough to marry a stranger, for building this life with me." He pressed a kiss to her neck. "Every good thing in my life traces back to you stepping off that stagecoach with a bird cage in your hands. And every good thing in mine traces back to you suggesting that birds sing at our wedding." She turned in his arms to face him. "We have been blessed, Robert. With love, with family, with a good life. Not everyone gets what we have. No, they do not, which is why I never take it for granted, not for a single day." He kissed her softly. "Here is to the rest of our lives, however long we are given. Here is to continuing to choose each other every day, just as we did when we spoke those vows." "I will always choose you," Miriam promised. "Always." They returned to the ranch refreshed and reconnected, ready to embrace the next phase of their lives. More grandchildren arrived over the following years, filling the ranch with noise and joy whenever they visited. William and Sarah had 3 more children after their first son. Catherine and her husband had 2 daughters. Even James eventually married and started a family. Elizabeth, true to her independent nature, became a teacher in Tucson and showed no interest in marriage, declaring herself perfectly content with her career and her freedom. Robert and Miriam supported her choice, proud of the strong, capable woman she had become. As they moved into their 50s and then their 60s, Robert and Miriam gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch. William took over most of the operations, proving himself more than capable. This gave Robert and Miriam time to pursue other interests, to travel occasionally, to simply enjoy each other's company. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918 with a gathering that brought together their children, grandchildren, and what felt like half the county. Maria and Diego, now quite elderly themselves, attended along with many of the people who had been at the original wedding 40 years before. Standing before the assembled crowd, Robert raised his glass. "40 years ago, I sent an advertisement to a Boston newspaper seeking a mail-order bride. I was lonely and hopeful and had no idea what would come of it. Then Miriam Reed stepped off that stagecoach carrying a bird cage, and my life changed forever. She has been my partner, my best friend, my love, and the mother of my children. She has made every day of these 40 years worth living." To Miriam, the best decision I ever made. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Miriam, her eyes damp with tears, stood and moved to Robert's side. And to Robert, the man who saw a frightened woman with a bird and offered her not just a home, but a family, a purpose, and a love beyond measure. The best decision I ever made was being brave enough to answer his advertisement. They kissed to more applause, and then the celebration continued with music and dancing and stories. Their grandchildren, ranging from infants to young adults, played together while their own children looked on with the same mixture of pride and exhaustion that Robert and Miriam remembered well from their own parenting years. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed and only family remained, Catherine brought out her guitar. She began to play a melody that Miriam recognized immediately. The song her mother used to sing, the one she had taught to Catherine years ago. Catherine began to sing, her voice pure and clear. One by one, the other family members joined in, even those who had never heard the song learning it quickly from those who had. The harmonies built and blended, filling the night air with music. Miriam gripped Robert's hand tightly, overcome with emotion. This was legacy, she realized. This music, these people, this love, it would continue beyond her and Robert. They had created something lasting and beautiful, something that would endure. When the song ended, There was a moment of profound silence. Then William stood and raised his glass once more. To my parents, who showed all of us what true partnership looks like. May we all be fortunate enough to build something half as beautiful as what they have created together. Hear, hear! The chorus of agreement rang out from all assembled. Robert pulled Miriam close, and she rested her head against his shoulder, exactly as she had done countless times over 40 years. Around them, their family laughed and talked, the sound of their voices the sweetest music Miriam had ever heard. "We did well," Robert whispered into her hair. "Look at them, Miriam. Look at what we created." "We did better than well," she whispered back. "We created a miracle." As the evening finally wound down and family members began to depart or retire to guest rooms, Robert and Miriam found themselves alone on the porch once more. The swing creaked gently as they rocked, their hands linked, their bodies fitting together with the ease of 40 years' practice. "Do you remember our wedding night?" Robert asked softly. "When you said you saw being happy as our future, I remember. Were you right? Have you been happy?" Miriam took her time answering, wanting to give the question the consideration it deserved. "Happy seems too small a word for what I have felt. I have been joyful, fulfilled, cherished, challenged, frustrated, exhausted, exhilarated, and deeply, profoundly grateful. But yes, Robert, I have been happy. Deliriously, impossibly happy." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That is all I ever wanted, your happiness. And you have given it to me every single day." She squeezed his hand. "What about you? Have you been happy?" "More than I ever thought possible. Before you came, I had a ranch and work and a purpose, but I did not have joy. You brought joy into my life, Miriam. You and our children, the family we built together, that is what makes everything worthwhile." They sat in silence for a while, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. These were the same stars they had watched on their wedding night, the same stars that had witnessed 40 years of their love story. "I hope we have many more years," Miriam said softly. "I am not ready to be done with this life with you. Neither am I. I plan to be around to celebrate our 50th anniversary and beyond." He chuckled softly. "Though I confess I am feeling my age more these days. We both are, but we are aging together and there is comfort in that." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Promise me something, Robert. Promise that whatever comes, however many years we have left, we will continue to choose each other. We will continue to build our partnership." "I promise," he said solemnly. "From now until my last breath I choose you, Miriam Anderson, always and forever." "And I choose you, Robert Anderson, always and forever." They sealed the promise with a kiss, tender and sweet, filled with 40 years of love and the promise of whatever time remained to them. When they finally retired to bed, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had on their wedding night, content and complete. The years continued, bringing both joy and sorrow as they do to all lives. Maria passed away peacefully in 1920, with Diego following her just 6 months later. Their deaths hit Robert and Miriam hard, losing dear friends who had been part of their lives for over 40 years. But they weathered the grief together, supporting each other through the pain. More grandchildren arrived, and then the first great-grandchild in 1922, making Robert and Miriam feel ancient and delighted in equal measure. The ranch continued to prosper under William's management, with James opening a second operation in California and expanding the family's holdings. Through it all, Robert and Miriam remained partners in the truest sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through challenges, and celebrated victories as a team. Their love, which had begun with letters and hope, had deepened into something unshakable, a foundation that supported not just them but their entire family. In the summer of 1928, On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family organized another massive celebration. Robert was 73 now, Miriam 71, both showing the wear of their years but still vibrant and engaged with life. The party was held at the ranch, with family traveling from across the country to attend. There were children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren everywhere, filling the house and grounds with noise and laughter. During the ceremony renewing their vows, which Reverend Thomas's successor performed, Robert's voice was steady as he repeated the same promises he had made 50 years earlier. Miriam's hands trembled slightly as she slid a new ring onto Robert's finger, but her voice was clear and strong. 50 years ago I married a stranger, she said, speaking not just to Robert but to the assembled crowd. I was terrified and hopeful and had no idea what the future would hold. Today, I stand before all of you married to my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. These 50 years have been the greatest adventure I could have imagined. Robert Anderson, I love you more today than I did 50 years ago, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Robert pulled Miriam close and kissed her. The celebration that followed was joyous, with multiple generations of their family coming together to honor the couple who had started it all. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Robert and Miriam slipped away to the porch, seeking a moment of quiet. They sat on the swing, moving gently back and forth, hands linked as they had been for 50 years. "Do you have any regrets?" Miriam asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it nonetheless. "Not a single one. Every choice I made led me to this moment, to this life with you. I would not change anything." He raised their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. "What about you? Any regrets?" "Only that I cannot live it all again. If I could go back to that frightened 26-year-old stepping off the stagecoach, I would tell her that everything is going to be better than she could possibly imagine. That she is about to meet the man who will make all her dreams come true and give her dreams she did not even know she had." "You made my dreams come true too," Robert said softly. "I thought I wanted a wife to help run the ranch and keep me company. What I got was so much more. A partner who challenged me to be better. A mother who raised our children with wisdom and love. A friend who made me laugh and supported me through hard times. And a lover who kept passion alive through all these years." They sat together as the stars emerged, just as they had done thousands of times over 50 years. Around them, their legacy continued, their family carrying forward the love and values they had instilled. "Thank you," Miriam whispered, "for everything. For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life with me." "Thank you," Robert replied, "for being brave enough to cross a continent for a chance at something better. For giving me everything I ever wanted and so much more. For 50 years of love and partnership." They stayed on the porch until the last of the guests had departed and the house had grown quiet. When they finally retired to bed, they lay facing each other in the darkness, their hands linked between them. "I love you, Miriam Anderson," Robert said. "For 50 years I have loved you, and I will love you into eternity." "I love you, Robert Anderson," Miriam replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and these 50 years have been the greatest gift." They fell asleep like that, hands linked, faces close enough to feel each other's breath, hearts beating in rhythm after half a century together. Robert passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1931, at the age of 76. He had been working in the barn that day, still insisting on being useful despite his advanced years. That evening, he and Miriam had shared supper and sat on the porch as always, talking about their grandchildren and making plans for summer visitors. They had gone to bed as they always did, wrapped in each other's arms, and when Miriam woke in the morning, Robert had simply slipped away during the night. The grief was crushing, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. After 52 years of partnership, Miriam felt like half of herself had been torn away. But even in her grief, she was grateful. Grateful that he had not suffered, grateful for every day they had been given, grateful that their last words to each other had been, "I love you." The funeral drew people from across the state, a testament to the respect and affection Robert had earned through his long life. William delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke about his father's integrity, his kindness, his dedication to family. Miriam sat in the front pew, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them mourning the man who had been the foundation of their family. When it came time to lower Robert into the ground, Miriam placed a single yellow feather in the coffin, a memorial to Melody the canary who had sung at their wedding and blessed their union. "Sing to him," she whispered. "Wherever you both are, sing to him." In the months that followed, Miriam struggled to find her footing in a world without Robert. The house felt empty despite regular visits from family. The porch swing sat unused because she could not bear to sit there without him beside her. Every evening when the stars came out, she felt his absence like a wound. But gradually, with the support of her family and the passage of time, Miriam began to heal. She could not stop missing Robert, would never stop missing him, but she learned to live with the grief rather than being consumed by it. She filled her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, teaching them to sew and sing, telling them stories about their grandfather and the life they had built together. She made sure they understood the importance of partnership, of choosing your person every day, of building something lasting through love and commitment. On what would have been their 55th anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a memorial service. They sang the old songs, told the old stories, and celebrated the love that had created them all. That evening, after everyone had left, Miriam sat alone on the porch swing for the first time since Robert's death. She rocked gently, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I miss you," she whispered to the empty air. "Every moment of every day I miss you, but I am grateful, Robert. Grateful for 52 years of love and laughter and partnership. Grateful that you suggested my mother's bird sing at our wedding. Grateful that you saw a frightened woman with a bird cage and offered her a home and a family and more love than she had ever dreamed possible." As if in answer, a yellow bird landed on the porch railing, a wild canary that tilted its head and looked at her with bright black eyes. Then it opened its beak and sang, the notes clear and pure in the evening air. Miriam felt tears stream down her face, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure if she was speaking to the bird, to Robert, to her mother, or to the universe itself. "Thank you for everything." The bird sang for a few more moments, then flew away into the gathering darkness. Miriam sat on the porch until the stars emerged, the same stars she and Robert had watched together for over half a century. She lived for 3 more years, surrounded by family who cherished her and made sure she was never lonely. She continued to sew and sing, to tell stories and pass on the wisdom she had gained through a life well lived. And every evening, she sat on the porch swing and talked to Robert as if he were still beside her, sharing the events of the day and telling him how much she loved him. Miriam passed away peacefully in her sleep in the autumn of 1934, at the age of 77. Her children found her in bed with a smile on her face, her hands folded over her heart, at peace. They buried her beside Robert under the wide Arizona sky, reuniting the partners who had built an empire of love. On her headstone, William had inscribed, "She came west with a songbird and found a love that echoed through eternity." The ranch continued to thrive through the generations that followed, a testament to the foundation Robert and Miriam had built. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled: hard work, integrity, family, and above all, love. The story of the mail-order bride who arrived with a songbird became a family legend, told and retold with each generation. The bird cage that had held Melody was preserved and displayed in the ranch house, a symbol of the courage it took to cross a continent for love, and the blessing that had been given on a wedding day in 1878. Years later, Catherine's granddaughter, researching the family history, found the letters that Robert and Miriam had exchanged before meeting. She read them with wonder, seeing in the careful words the beginning of a love story that had shaped her entire family. In one of Robert's early letters, he had written, "I am looking for a true partner, someone to build a life with. I cannot promise riches or ease, but I can promise honesty, respect, and the best efforts of my heart." And in Miriam's response, "I am looking for the same, a partner, a friend, a chance to build something meaningful. I can offer hard work, loyalty, and hope for what we might create together." They had found exactly what they were looking for in each other, and in finding it, they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch still stood, the land still prospered, and somewhere in the vast Arizona sky, two souls still watched over the family they had created, together as they had always been, as they would always be. The story of Robert and Miriam Anderson became more than just family history. It became a reminder that love could bloom in unexpected places, that courage and hope could transform lives, and that a single decision, like answering an advertisement or suggesting a bird sing at a wedding, could change everything. In the end, it was a simple story. Two lonely people who took a chance on each other and built something extraordinary. A mail-order bride who arrived with a songbird, and a rancher who suggested it sing at their wedding, united not just in marriage but in purpose, partnership, and a love that would echo through the ages, a testament to the power of choosing each other every day for a lifetime and beyond.